On this episode of Technically Leadership, Boyd Hemphill joins me on a wide-ranging conversation from shielding your team, or not, from internal politics, to rethinking technical debt, to empathy for your management, and more. Boyd has experience as everything from a technical IC to a CTO, and now consults with companies to assist in leveling up their team's value. We've known one another for a while now, and we always have a great, insightful conversation. Now, you get to sit in with us as we chat. Let's get to it. All right, folks, as you heard during the introduction, I have a guest with me, and my guest is Boyd. Boyd, I'll have already done an introduction for you, so we can kind of start right in, unless there's like something you really, really, really want people to know, other than who you are and why I'm interviewing you and all that fun stuff.
Choose happiness.
There we go. That is all right, folks. We're going to close this down. Thanks. No, I'm just kidding. So Boyd and I have known each other for a while now, and you're usually the person I come to when I have questions about things, especially in leadership, especially in technical leadership. But I think we wanted to talk about kind of a tough topic today, which is shielding your team and handling politics. So I guess my first question is how do you shield your team when you're dealing with politics, and why should you? Or should you?
So you saved it at the end there, because my answer is the first thing you do is you don't.
Okay.
And so let me explain. A lot of leaders, especially new leaders that I talk to, don't share the realities of their situation with their team. What they fail to realize is that the reality of their situation as a leader is a very specific description of the situation of the larger company. And if the goal of the team is to deliver value to the company in which they sit, then why would I not want a group of brilliant engineers to know what my day-to-day looks like, the problems that I'm trying to solve? Because I suddenly get a sort of wisdom of a crowd, right? And this crowd has context. So when I come to them and I say, hey, we have to, for example, we have to decrease our AWS bill by 30%. The first question is, why? Well, because we need to cut budgets, or we're going to have to cut heads. Why would I have that from them? When I say that to them, I'm saying to them, I trust you with this information. I don't think you're going to go running off scared, because if I say we have to cut the budget by 30% on AWS, they're going to figure it out, because you ready for the secret? They're not stupid. Right? So the first thing I try to do is I try to be as transparent as possible, up to but not including HR stuff. So for example, if I have let's say I have this person named Laura on my team and she's underperforming. I'm not going to talk to Jeff about Laura and say, hey man, what do you think of this Laura? She's not doing a good job, blah, 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 right? That leadership is lonely. So there is a point that you can reach very quickly where you can overshare, and that point can actually put you in legal trouble. So do be careful. But the truth of the matter is, I try very hard not to shield them from the information.
Right.
Okay. Now, every engineering team needs to garden. When I say garden, I mean, if you have a feature development team who has a build that lasts 45 minutes, you know that everybody on that team either wants to fix that build so it takes 5 minutes or less, or probably should be looking for a different job. Right? Do they speak up? Well, if they're not speaking up about that, that's the first question to ask yourself is why? Okay. Is it because they think people outside of the team are watching and judging them, because they want to spend time on something that's not a feature? Hey, I'm like, how many times do you guys try to run that build a week? Oh, I don't know. Between all of us, maybe 50. Okay, let's see. 50 times 45 minutes is roughly 50 hours, because there's the 15 minutes of you getting back into what you were doing when the build fails, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we just lost more than a full-time person this week. Maybe we should fix that, y'all. So,
Yeah.
so I need to make sure that I am not only providing them space for that, but that when they fix that problem, let's say they get it down to 15 minutes.
Hmm.
Now they're running the build 50 times. Let's keep our baseline for just a minute. That's 15 minutes. So that's 10 hours as opposed to 50. We literally just
Right.
saved a full-time person's time, right?
Right.
Okay. So what do I need to do? I need to go to my boss and his peers, and I need to say, I gave my team this much time, and they have
Hmm.
recovered a full-time person per week, which means in 2 months, we're going to be winning
Yeah.
because that's the payoff horizon, right? So part of me shielding my team is to go out and market the wins of my team that are the non-functional as well, because
Right.
for them to be satisfied in their job, they need to do the work that they believe is important, as well as the work that the company believes that is important. Because there are very few companies on earth that are going to go to a team and say, you should decrease the time of your build,
Yeah.
actually just assuming that it gets done. And so we need to be aware of what those assumptions are, just like they assume that you're testing your software.
That's a great assumption. I know, but
Yeah, well,
that's
it's a
true.
great assumption that, but is it true?
I don't know. I doubt it actually is. I mean, yeah, definitely, definitely a consideration there, I guess, because there's a lot of things that management above the technical management assumes about what actually gets done in a day-to-day basis. So basically, you're saying that the best defense is a good offense, going out and talking about what your team does so that you don't really have to shield them from politics coming your way or changes at the company or pivots or whatever, because they already are aware of those pivots, but then you're also making sure the business above you is aware of the kind of work you do. So you're already positioned well.
I think I'd like to make a distinction with a difference, but it's subtle. The
Yeah.
positive, the positive marketing is the shield, or at least part of it.
Gotcha.
Not that I don't have to shield them. It's that me telling people what the team is doing, in addition to producing features, if this is a feature team,
Hmm.
is part of me establishing that this is a good team, that not only do they care about what the company is asking for, they care about what the company is not asking for, but is assuming.
Oh, okay. That
This
makes
is
sense.
this is a group of people who understand the larger context in which they work. And I can demonstrate
S-
that through these anecdotes.
Yeah. So would you say then that, um, I don't know, don't know that you would say this, but it probably means that a really good manager or a really good leader already understands a lot of those business cases, which is a given, but also has like an empathy with the people above them to know the assumptions that they already have. And that's really what they're doing, kind of saying like the unwritten rules of what the company is expecting of them. I don't know if that quite makes sense.
I think it makes amazing sense. I think the word empathy in this particular case is probably the most important word that's going to be spoken in the time you and I have together today.
Yeah.
Whether it's my team has empathy for me and my situation, I have empathy for them and their situation, because empathy actually means it goes both ways, right?
Right.
Why wouldn't you take that up, whatever the org chart looks like, right? I should
Yeah.
have empathy for my supervisor in the same way that I expect my team to have empathy for me. And I should seek that understanding from them. So when I'm trying to make large decisions, the questions that I'm asking my supervisor aren't, should I do this or should I do that? They tend to be more, if I do this, these are the consequences that I can foresee. What am I missing and how important is it?
Hmm.
Can you help me prioritize this, and this? Because I only have capacity to accomplish one of those two things at this time. And can often be uncomfortable conversations. You need to have both of those done. Okay. So would you like me to lie to you? Because I can either lie to you, or we can get one of these things done.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And sometimes the conversation is, no, we have to have both of those done, and creative problem solving happens, not just at the level of me and my supervisor, but I'll go to the team and say, the business really needs both of these things done right now. What can we cut? What, et cetera, et cetera. Then we get into the concept of technical debt, right? And I'm one of those people that thinks the word technical debt is like the best metaphor ever. Because one of the things that I try to do, often unsuccessfully, is to understand the terms of the debt. We talk about technical debt all the time. It's bad. Honestly, technical debt is just a tool, right? It's just like debt and finance. Hey, the business wants to go faster. Let's borrow $1 billion, invest that $1 billion, and reach a target fast enough to capture a market that's worth $10 billion. All right. By the time we're done paying interest on the $1 billion, we're still $8 billion ahead. I think that's probably going to be a win. That was a good debt to take on. Financing your house and personal finance is often a good debt to take on, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is interesting. So I've never really heard someone explain technical debt this way. So I'm like completely going to pivot our conversation. Let's keep on this topic. So,
sorry.
No, please, come on. Let's do this. It's fine. The technical debt. So you're saying basically think of it more like real debt that you're taking on, like from a business risk and all of those things, and how long your interest rates are going to be, and how long the life of that debt is. Is that really what you're saying?
What are the payment terms? If we take on this debt, how much glass does the team have to crawl across to pay the debt down?
Yeah.
What kind of time is that going to take? And do we actually have the funds, the calories in the team in this case to pay for it? And typically with technical debt, you pay for it with time.
Right.
Right. So, and of course, time is really precious in a feature team because it's all about the feature, so, okay. So if I have a product manager that's turning the screws on my team, and I'm like, okay, we're going to assume this amount of debt, and you are going to go back to your boss and you're going to win the argument that gives us an extra month on this thing that's next on the roadmap, so that we can ensure that over the course of the 3 months of that is working, that we can pay down that debt to a place where we're not going to end up declaring bankruptcy on this piece of technology 3 years from now.
Right. Okay.
When you count it in those terms, suddenly your product managers, even your executives, they can understand it, because everyone understands the debt, because most folks have a car that they're paying on, or a house that they're paying on, or even a credit card, right? So
right.
The first thing that I really try to impress upon anybody is you didn't sign for any debt that you didn't understand the terms of up front, unless you're a sucker and I have a bridge to sell you. Right. So, so why are you trying to force a situation where you would have a team sign up for a debt that is not understood, when you're going to suffer from the team taking that debt on as well, through not being able to get your features through fast enough if you're a product manager, through having to listen to your executive say, hey, that Boyd guy's an idiot and his team is crappy because we're not getting things done fast enough or with a high enough quality, but the debt was the cause of that, et cetera, et cetera. So as a leader, I tend to negotiate really, really hard when we decide that we're going to do both of those things. Like I set up that straw man earlier. Okay. And the team and I ask what's going to be cut. The conversation didn't end there. I go back to my boss and say, this is how we're going to do it. And this is why it's going to hurt. And this is what I expect you to do. And, and I have this product manager that I'm now aligned with on this, now, of course, somebody can come from on high above them and,
completely tank it. Yeah.
But at least I can go to my team and say, I have lined up these things. These are the expectations that are set. You will be able to pay this debt down during the next product evolution cycle, or 3 product evolution, whatever the negotiation turned out.
Right. Yeah. So that's an interesting way to do it. And I mean, I've always thought about come back to the team, talk about the trade-offs, go back, talk to the manager, and have that conversation, like talk to your manager, your leader, to kind of say like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's why. But I never really thought to put it in those terms specifically of how this is related specifically to technical debt as more of like a finance experience, I guess you could say, a technical finance. Could that be a thing? I guess it could be. Why not? Technical finance experience. I'm going to call it that now. So that's an interesting conversation. I'm still kind of chewing on the implications of what that could look like in any organization. So you could almost take that
out to you in what you said, because I think this
Yeah.
is another one of those fallacies, especially for new managers. You painted a very linear set of
I
steps.
did.
Actually, it's a circle. Think about the straw man for just a second. I'm having a conversation with my boss. He turns the screws on me. I go to my team. My principal engineer says to me, she's like, yo, man, if we're going to do that, we're going to have to cut these corners. Maybe our test coverage is going to only be 20% instead of 80%, whatever that, right? So she's like, all right, here's our reality. Now, again, nobody's happy about this. These are difficult conversations, not easy conversations.
Right.
So the next thing that I do is I'm going around the circle. I go to the product manager. Here's how we're going to get this done. I need you to commit to allowing us to pay some of this debt off. Okay. Go to my boss. Back to my boss. We can accomplish the thing that you're turning the screws on me. Here's what it's going to cost you. Here's what it's going to cost us. I have the product manager signed up, or I don't, and I need your help, or whatever that looks like. Okay. Now I have the blessing from those folks. I go back to my principal engineer and probably a couple of other people on the team now, and I say, all right, this is what I've lined up. Is it acceptable? Yes, no. All right. And then I just keep working that loop, because
around and around.
We made the agreement, and I'm going to write it in Confluence or whatever somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Document.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I've got to repeat it over and over and over again. People are busy, right? So part of that empathy is understanding that my boss is probably negotiating with a bunch of other jerks like me to for all the same reasons, right?
Right.
So in terms of shielding the team, I've got a lot of work to do there, because we're going to be asked to do things that we don't want, and we're going to be forced to do things in ways that we don't want for oftentimes good reasons. I want the team to understand what those good reasons are, the transparency. I want them to see me working on their behalf. And I want everyone, including my boss, that product manager, to benefit from understanding the trade-offs that we're making and actively participating in ensuring that those trade-offs don't bite us in the butt 3 years from now.
Yeah. Now, I mean, speaking of the fallacy of linearity, I guess I could call it. Obviously, what happens then when the company pivots? Because there's your debt. Like, I guess this is refinancing the debt in the analogy that we're making here. Like, you've been working on a feature, or let's just call it a feature. You've been working on the feature that's like the big thing, and it's a startup. And of course, something happens in the market, like AI, help us all. AI happens, and suddenly everybody's like, AI, everything needs to be AI. So suddenly you're being told pivot 100% to this new feature, but you just left a whole bunch of tech debt behind you that you had already committed to getting. How much are you fighting for that space to keep fixing the tech debt while still trying to get this feature now out the door that like you now have to negotiate for? So this just seems like it could get really complicated really fast.
That's why we make the big bucks.
That's true.
But I mean, in the end, in the situation that you've described, you own a timeshare at that point. You ain't getting rid of that.
Oh, don't worry. I'll bleep that out.
So the technical debt thing I've developed really well as a metaphor, right? But the that timeshare thing was just off the cuff. So don't go reading any more into that than.
Well, we might be able to pull it off, but
it could be fun. Anyway. But like I said, I don't have that. I don't have that really well developed in my mind. Paul Zarkowski really, I think, eloquently described this. I don't know if these were his words, but I remember we were at the OpenStack Summit in Vancouver ages ago, talking about Docker to a lot of people. And folks were like, well, oh my God, what am I going to do with this mainframe application? Blah, blah, blah. And Jez Humble had also started talking about the strangler pattern at that point. And the answer became, sometimes you just build a walled garden around the thing you just can't deal with anymore. So from a manager's point of view, from a protect your team point of view, at the point when you declare that walled garden. So for example, if we have to pivot towards this AI feature and we've got the thing working, but it's janky, but there are real users on it and it's continuing to scale. And Google is pretty famous for this too.
Yeah.
We're going to essentially build a walled garden around that. We're not going to do a whole lot with it. We're going to keep it alive. We're going to scale it by throwing money at it, essentially. And there are good examples of this wherever you can find COBOL developers. Those folks exist, they make a good living, right? And they're the ones that keep that one mainframe going at the core of somebody's business. So what is that company doing? Well, they could spend whatever that fortune is, but they have actually done some sort of financial and risk analysis and realized that if they just buy a new mainframe from IBM every 5 years, they can essentially keep doing business indefinitely at a far smaller cost and risk to the business than rewriting it in Rust, because that's what all the cool kids are doing.
Right.
Or Java, pick a poison. So, I'd really like to see the topic of, I can name that tune in 3 notes or less, because how many engineers have you met who said, oh, I could rewrite that in a weekend?
Yeah.
Don't even actually understand what all the details are of the domain, let alone what the code is doing.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. There's no way you're doing that.
Exactly. So when you start to back off of that, the scenario that you set up really already exists, and there are already good muscles for dealing with that. Again, what it becomes is this negotiation of, look, if you want us to pivot this way, we're leaving behind these things that we've all talked about. Remember, everyone's educated about what was done. That's okay. There's something in writing. We're going to break this agreement. Okay, what's the new agreement? The new agreement is we're going to break off 2 or 3 people who just like working on old broken stuff. I can't believe there are people like that. Right?
Oh yeah.
And they're gonna keep that thing alive. And we know that we're going to have to spend this much money on it. And yeah, that's more money than we planned on spending, but that's just that's the debt service we had to pay. That's the early termination fee for the note that we had to pay, so that we can go pivot towards this big new advantage, AI in your example. So does that help, or does it just confuse me?
It does. It's almost, I'm thinking of this in terms of the difference between like a startup and a large company, right? Startups pivot really fast a lot of the time. And in some ways, they don't necessarily have the money to encapsulate. And so almost the more they pivot, the more they're losing funds debt-wise.
So,
and like, this is how I'm looking at it. I know I'm probably like taking you way down the direction we were planning.
I think what you're asking is a fascinating question, because you're focused on money, but think of it as like a fungible asset for a moment. Now, keep going.
But wait, what I'm thinking is that, so you look at the startups who keep doing this pivot, and eventually they pivot too many times and they don't survive. And then you have the large companies who have the money to pivot and encapsulate all those things, but they don't do the experiments because they're reevaluating the risk situation. And it's almost, you can just see that from a financial standpoint, if you're taking that analogy that way, you can see the age real fast without even having to think about the money. I don't know. Maybe we're getting a little too far off the leadership track, but this is just kind of a fascinating look. Like, if you are looking to become a CTO, and I kind of have been leading to this. So if you've been looking to become a CTO, these are the kinds of thoughts that you need to have, because you're thinking about these motions all the time, right? At least that's what I remember thinking myself.
So
maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. But I think there's a, in the framework of the conversation that we're having, I think there's some nuance that will really enrich what you're suggesting. So, first of all, a little truth in advertising. I'm a small company guy. I've been employee 1 twice, right? So I want to be clear for your listeners about that. I have consulted in quite large organizations as well. So I've been inside the belly of beasts, if you will, but I have not been a full-time employee in a company any larger than about 1,000 people.
Wait, really?
Yep, really. And generally speaking, I am I'm an employee of a company of less than 100 or 200 people.
Okay.
But I've
For some
consulted
reason.
in
Anyway.
large organizations. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things as a consultant that you can get in a large company that you don't as a full-time employee, often, especially a full-time employee, sort of farther down the
Yeah.
thing, is a broader view. Most large companies, like for example, HP, they have Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 business. Horizon 1 is the original, we make printers. Horizon 2
Yeah.
is the, hey, we have our own cloud. It's not very good, but we have our own cloud. And then Horizon 3 is, maybe HP is trying to outmaneuver everybody in the AI world. We don't know that, but maybe they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Intel, AMD, yada, yada, yada. If you have friends inside of there, especially friends who are on that distinguished or principal level as engineers or that senior VP, just feed them a few beers, get them talking about their world, and you really realize what part of the business they're in. So Horizon 3 in a large organization is a bit like a startup. And
Okay.
I think in the lean startup, Intuit is the sort of the bell cow for the big company that was doing the lean startup-y stuff, running many experiments during tax season, yada yada. But think about how a startup that can pivot, like that has that. I hate to use the word agility, but I'm using it with a lowercase a.
Yeah.
Think about that startup that has that agility for just a moment. Yeah, they can pivot really easily, and honestly, they don't necessarily have to pay for that in dollars. They could just pay for that in users. For example, this was a bad idea.
Oh, okay.
We're just going to walk away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, maybe it's if they're a B2B organization, they have that one customer, they'll keep the thing going and keep the customer's money coming in. And then one day they'll just, deprecate it or just sell the code to the customer or what have you. So there's
Right.
more ways to unwind things than just money. And that's what I meant by fungible assets earlier, right? Is
Yeah.
You can pay for things with things that are ultimately can be measured as money, but aren't necessarily money, like just dropping those
Yeah.
users.
Right.
So in the world of the larger company, there's the notion of that brand cachet, right? So if you're Apple, the last thing you want to do is put out something that's like an iPod and have it blow up in your, because everyone
Right.
talks about the Apple Next.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Failures ever, right? So
Yeah.
there's still a little stink on Apple about that, even though Apple's now, was the first $1 trillion company ever. People still talk about the Next. It's the
Right.
strange thing. So there are considerations that you have because you're inside the brand, but there are ways for the brand to deal with that. For example, if Apple wanted to go and innovate something that may not be very Apple-y, they could just spin up some LLC,
Yeah.
put some people in there, and they can test it until they're sure that it's an Apple-y thing. So large organizations are generally innovating, or they're dying. And again, they didn't get to be billion-dollar companies because they're dumb. So they're probably innovating somewhere. It's just a matter of figuring out where and if you care.
Yeah. I mean, when you were saying that, I'm thinking of like Nissan and Datsun and like kind of moving into different markets, but that's outside of the tech world, but it is a similar thing. And that was a successful move. For people who don't know, that was when Nissan was entering the US market. So they decided to come in as a different brand. So they did not hurt their brand. And that was Datsun. And Datsun took off with the Datsun Z, 240Z, 260Z, and a number of other cars, the 510. Anyway, I'll get off the topic of cars. Otherwise, I will talk all day. But it's an interesting thing to think about, like as a manager trying to think through, like, where are you in the business? Do you know? And how does that affect your team? Like if you are the Horizon 1 business inside of the business, Horizon 1 org instead of the business, like, does that change in your, well, I shouldn't say in your experience, as a consultant, when you looked at it, do you find the managers at those different levels think differently or act differently?
Yeah, because they have a different job. Their
How
job is
so?
Horizon One is essentially all about removing risk and cost control. The innovation is done, and
Okay.
they're just
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're often operating the the cash cow of the business.
Hmm.
So, if Horizon One goes offline for whatever reason, every other function of the business, Horizon Two, Horizon Three, HR, whatever, grinds to a halt because the money's not coming in.
Hmm.
So if so that those folks tend to, because they have a different job, they're hired because they are generally risk averse.
Hmm.
Um, they understand how to maintain the status quo rather than constantly looking for the next best thing to do. Um,
Right.
they're not only comfortable, but they thrive in situations where the technology may be 20, 30 years old. Those COBOL developers, for example, or the people that manage them.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because it's not like you can tell all your COBOL developers, hey, you guys should go to the CNCI conference, right?
That
Hey, why don't
would
you?
go over well.
Yeah, why don't you go to that open source conference or even a DevOps conference? I mean, what do COBOL people care about DevOps?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, DevOps conferences are a lot about people and managing the organization that you're in as well as your tech.
Mhm.
So, you know, Cobalt developers do have to deal with all those politics and things like that as well.
That's
So,
that's that's true. That's
yeah,
true. Yeah,
I
the
may be
soft side.
biased. I
No, no,
mean,
no, no. I agree. Yeah, I might be too. Because all
yeah,
that
just a
soft stuff
little bit.
you thought about, sure, but say Jenkins to a COBOL developer.
Yeah, that's
You
fair.
know
That's
what I
fair.
mean?
They're
So
not really
all
going to
the
care
hard,
that much.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. It would, and could COBOL developers benefit from, ultimately, a continuous delivery situation? Probably, but all the money, all the risks, and then all of the human stress of these people who never saw that stuff, who are now
Hmm.
being told you've got to do it this way. Is it worth it? And I think what we can see is basically most companies have decided that the answer is, not so much.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that again, to the original question, because all those forces are in play, the director of engineering in a Horizon One situation is a different job and a different personality than a director of engineering in Horizon Two or in Horizon Three or a startup for that.
Right. Yeah, or startup, or startup. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, especially as like so many people right now are looking for jobs and things like that. And knowing what kind of horizon director person you are kind of helps you understand what jobs you apply for are going to be the most successful.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a consideration. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I have to admit, I'm aware that we're getting close to time. And I think we could just kind of riff on leadership topics for hours. Obviously, you and I have done this many times before, and
Indeed.
we will probably continue to do this again. But I do want to give you a chance to kind of plug anything that you're doing and things like that. But I want to kind of close out the conversation. I know we started out kind of talking about shielding your team and doing those kinds of things, and then we kind of have veered off to talk about tech debt and thinking about things on many different horizons. I guess coming back to that original thought, though, as more of a wide view on that. You're really saying that don't try to protect your team, keep your team informed and informed to the point that they're allowed to be informed, I guess I should say. And then do you find that that's different in different situations, like how informed people want to be? Because kind of getting that Cobalt developer. If you're on Horizon One, you're the Cobalt developer. Do you really want to know about everything? Should you tell them? Does it is it worth it?
So
You might not be really be shielding them from anything really at this point.
there's always politics.
Yeah, that's true.
Politics is what happens when two people get into a conversation. It's happening right now, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know.
So oblivious that
I dream of a world, but it's okay.
yeah, no, I got you. So I simply believe that the more information that my engineers have, the better decisions they're going to make. The better
Hmm.
decisions they make, the easier it is for me to talk about all of the awesome stuff they're doing,
Hmm.
which makes them the team that gets that has the trust. So when they raise their hand and say, "This is really wrong, we need to fix it," they're not seen as the Chicken Little team. They're seen as,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, we should go fix that team."
Yeah.
And and so I try to and make no mistake, the verb to protect is in play. I do
Hmm.
try to protect them. For example, if my boss were to show up to stand up and start issuing orders, I'd tell him right in front of everybody to stop. You need to
Yeah.
stop confusing things. Let's have a conversation afterwards and tell me what you need. Right.
Have
So
you ever had that happen? I
yes,
haven't. Oh, okay.
I have. It was small startup, 20 people.
Oh, okay.
The pressure was amazing. Younger leader. Um, and hey, we need to do blah blah blah. And I'm like, cool. What about all this other stuff that we have going on?
Hmm.
Well, I'm like, how about you and I talk about this afterwards? That's probably a good idea. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
it's not you're not only protecting people from things that are malicious.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, you're just protecting them from things that are thoughtless.
Right.
I have an immediate need, and I have the 5 minutes I need to go to that stand up that I know is happening right now, and I'm going to go and get it off my mind. Right? Um, you know, I COVID to some extent has really helped people become more skilled at asynchronous communication, but
Yeah.
not nearly enough. So it still happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely gotten those like 10 p.m. frantic message from boss's boss. Hey, I need you to do this right now. And it's like, oh, okay, this is great. Those are always fun messages. Um,
I worked with a guy named
es-
Mike Scallon who measured things and how many puppies were going to die. So my first question to the boss when I get something out of band like that is, how many puppies are going to die? And if I get back, no
oh,
puppies are going to die, I'm like, great, talk to you in the morning.
yeah, exactly. I used to call that 5 alarm fire people, where everything was a 5 alarm fire. And so they would message me at 10 p.m. at night. And they're the reason I have learned very, very quickly how to turn off notifications on every single chat system I have ever used. Uh, because you got to turn them off at after hours or something. If you get that, if you are supposed to have that kind of separation in your job, you
Mhm.
better learn how to turn those off, because you are going to get the 5 alarm fire people who everything is a 5 alarm fire. Everything requires all hands on deck. And it's like, hey, did that really need to get done tonight?
So usually
Did
for the
that really
team,
need to get done? Yeah.
usually in a team agreement, I really encourage the team to write something about you own your alarms, turn
Yeah.
them and so unless you're on call, and then the team knows how to find everybody on the team outside of the alarming situation. So like
Hmm.
we get a huge incident and we need to escalate to other people within the team, we can all find each other if we need to. But
Right. Yeah.
no, even I can't necessarily find anybody directly except through the on-call system, for example. And that's
Right.
to foster exactly what you're talking about right there.
Yeah.
Um, so a team agreement is another great way to help
That's a
people.
whole nother topic and I want to talk about
Ah,
it.
that's another way to have the team tell you how they want to be protected.
Right. Yeah.
So and I mean, if you're going and protecting people from stuff they don't want to be protected from, you are disenfranchising them. So it behooves you
True.
as a leader to go and find out what they want to be protected from.
Yeah.
And you can't ask that as a
Yeah.
direct question, or you'll get a bunch of you'll get a bunch of recency bias and memes. I want you to protect that guy over there because he's mean, right?
Yeah.
It does happen. I mean, I had to uninvite a senior VP from all of our incident retrospectives because she was hell bent on making sure that blame was assigned. She saw that as her job, to the
Huh.
extent that we would suddenly reschedule them so she couldn't attend.
Oh,
I,
wow.
I was actively working her. to protect the team.
Huh.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess like if you kind of come up in that way of thinking, or if you don't know how to handle the pressure, like I think that's probably more the thing. It's like you don't know how to handle the pressure of where you are and having people above you like pressuring you for like, hi, why did this happen?
Mhm.
You want to assign blame to somebody. Like that's a thing. And so if you don't have that muscle built already to respond back with, this is why this happened. We didn't have guardrails. We didn't have guidelines. We're going to be improving those. It had nothing to do with the person that was there. It just happened to be that person was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the guardrails failed, or the guidelines failed, one or the other.
Yep.
If you don't have those
So,
muscles, yeah, I can definitely see that being a problem.
so one of the things I always require as part of a team agreement is all blame to Boyd, all credit to you all.
That
And
sounds
so,
right.
for
Yep.
example, in some of those incident retrospectives, we knew that, say, Tim goofed because he
Hmm.
didn't know a thing, right? Well, what we didn't want is that going up the chain of, to the chief product officer. Yeah, that guy, Tim, he's an idiot, because quite the opposite.
Fire. Yeah.
Absolutely true, right? Tim was a rock star. He just didn't know a thing, right?
Right.
So what ended up happening is the blame fell to me.
Right.
Boyd team made this mistake due to not having good enough documentation. The
Yeah.
documentation is in the process of being fixed right now. This will not happen again.
Right.
But we had to hide ourselves from, well, quite not
Yeah.
evil VP lady, so that we could, so that we could get to that. And then once I just kept taking the bullets, she just gave up. She was getting her pound
Yeah.
of sugar, maybe, or at least she was satisfied in some way. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Huh.
that there's a very concrete example of dealing with the toxicity, I think, that a lot of people think of when they use the word protect. But I really would like folks to leave this conversation with the idea that to protect means so much more than that one toxic person, because there's so many organizations
Yeah.
that have any of this. Everyone's trying to do their best. And so that thing that you brought up earlier in the conversation, empathy, understanding that while
Yeah.
is trying to do their best, they're making a mistake that's impacting you, and how to negotiate that is really that's really the
Yeah.
place to start.
Yeah. And I better like cut us off here. Let that be the end of the conversation. Otherwise, you and I are just going to keep going.
Oh, that's true.
Listen,
Yeah.
hey, Boyd, you know what? Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to come and sit with me and record this and share what you know with the world. I know the listeners really appreciate it. I always appreciate getting time to chat with you because it's always fun. Um, but thank you. I want to give you a chance if there's anything you want to shout out that you're doing, any like community thing that is like your jam right now, or a book you want to share. This is your time. Let the world know what I'm doing the hot ones thing. Let the world know what's up for you. So,
Um, I'd like to get something out of my head and out into the world. I've posted on LinkedIn about this a few times, but I really believe that as leaders, we should be thinking in two systems.
uh-huh.
There's a system of software that we produce, and that's what everyone, the system, the system is down. Okay, so we get the DevOps people to go and push the DevOps buttons, and the system is back up, whatever, right?
Magic. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's an entire system that's producing the software. And when you start
Mhm.
thinking about like the theory of constraints, Eliyahu Goldratt, Gene Kim's the Phoenix Project, and what have you, we do not provide ourselves the ability to bring engineering rigor to that human system. And Conway's law tells us that if our human system sucks, our software is going to suck.
Right.
So I think we're going about the problem wrong. A lot of the innovations we have around builds and all this other stuff is great. However, if we're not really looking at how we're communicating, how the humans are building the software, and everything
Yeah.
that goes into that, from the quality of a stand up to the quality of a team retrospective, we're not going to get the product that we want. And I wish there was more
Yeah.
conversation about that.
That's fair. That's
So I'm
fair.
counting on you to
So
tell me that I need to listen to the next podcast, because that's going to be talked about by somebody smarter than me.
I'll have to think about who I could invite. I will say, how about this? How about this? How about people all show up to DevOps Days Austin and we'll do an open spaces about it.
You can do
Let's
that.
do it. Or something like that. We'll figure this out. Keep an eye on LinkedIn or something. We'll all talk about it. But hey, Boyd, thank you so much.
That was really a pleasure, Laura. When I said to my wife, I'm going to be talking to Laura, she's like, is that a 1 hour Laura conversation or a 3 hour Laura conversation? I said, I'm pretty sure it's a 1 hour conversation because she's got a bunch of editing to do. So,
it's always how it works, but we will get our 3-hour conversation soon, eventually.
Indeed.
But on that note, I want to say thank you all for listening, and we are going to say bye for now. So wave goodbye, say bye. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Technically Leadership. Feedback is a gift that I treasure. So please find me on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Mastodon, or the Packet Pushers Slack. Or you can send feedback through the form at packetpushers.net/FU. By the way, that stands for follow-up. Links to all of those spots are in the description and show notes. Share this episode with your friends and colleagues, and let me know if you have someone you think I should talk with about leadership. For now, though, go lead.